This episode is proudly supported by Anchor Food Professionals, makers of mainland cheese. Here's Andy Sy from the Notting Hill Hotel.
We've been using them for a few years now, using their tasty and mozzarella cheese. We go through about 135 kilos a week at the moment. So a huge number. So we use it for our garlic bread, our pizzas, our parmas, our bechamel, our cheese sauce for our croquettes and arancini, throughout our lasagnas, anywhere we can really. It's such a good product. You know, having the freshest chips to your fresh chicken to a freshly crumbed schnitzel and topping up with a really high quality cheese is amazing.
For more information, go to anchorfoodprofessionals.com.
He's like, these trees are 300 years old and you have picked the mulberries when they're underripe? And I was like, oh no, I'm going home.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. The crossover of bar and restaurant is a key feature of the modern dining landscape. But how do you get that balance right and ensure all manner of diners get the right experience, and the business also makes the necessary margins too? Max Sharrad is the chef and founding partner of Fugazzi Bar and Dining and Nido Bar as well in Adelaide, South Australia. Max, how are you? I'm
good, Huck. How are you?
I'm good, mate. It's good to get you on the show. I know you're a busy man, but how are things down there in Adelaide?
Adelaide's good. We typically say that Melbourne Cup Day is the kickoff for silly season. So although both restaurants have done very well over winter, it's about to get pretty crazy, I think.
Yeah, you've got two powerhouse venues that are, helping shape the dining landscape or the modern landscape in Adelaide. Tell us a bit about both of them and sort of how different they are.
That's very kind of you to say. I think Nido is we called Nido meaning nest, and obviously a nest is like the birthplace, I guess. So. Probably the first place that I had true ownership over, along with Simon, who's the restaurateur. I'm sure you're familiar with his name, Simon Kadachi, and my wife Laura, and a number of other people, including Chris Woodcock, who's our venue manager. But yeah, so that's the suburban, more casual, very approachable sort of restaurant that it all started at probably for me. In terms of restaurant ownership, and then Fugazzi came along sort of 2 years after we I would say that the opening of Nido was fairly successful, and then for some reason or another we thought that it'd be a fantastic idea to open a massive restaurant in the heart of the CBD in the middle of a pandemic, which turned out to be a pretty good gamble in the end, actually. Fugazzi is like the younger brother, younger sister, younger sibling that you get dressed up and you go out to dinner in a beautiful setting, and the whole concept behind that was that we couldn't travel when we opened it, so why not bring some of the features of traveling and dining out when you're on holiday back to Adelaide.
Yeah, it's interesting, the restaurant bar sort of dynamic that's happened, and the sort of merging of both of them, so that there's not one or another, and people can sort of get the experience that they want from the venue. Like, what was it like creating these venues that sort of have that balance of both, but you refer to it as a restaurant, but they're also bars as well in that sense. How do you get that right, that sort of model?
Well, I will say that it is tricky to like I would say the bar part of the restaurants is probably the trickiest part, mainly because bartenders want to work in like bars, and I mean probably like especially at Fugazzi, like at lunchtime, although you get a lot of cocktails and stuff like that, it's kind of like a dispensary, the bar, more or less. But then as you get towards the weekend and people are looking for like a late drink and stuff like that, or like after the footy, then the bar like really starts coming alive. So I would say it's always a work in progress, but the merging of the two things, I guess it makes sense in a like it's more of like a I mean, wine bars have always been a thing where, you know, the food element is a smaller part, and I guess it's just elevating the bar part and the food part to sort of merge, which makes perfect sense, really.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about Adelaide at the moment. It's kind of really evolved quite beautifully from a food sense, and you've been a big part of that for the last, for a long period of time now, and particularly since COVID as well, as it's reshaped. What's exciting you about Adelaide at the moment?
Again, very, very kind of you to say that. It's jumping at the moment, man, to be honest. Like, there's some really, really cool stuff going on. Like, I went to Thelma on the weekend. Tom Campbell's just got nominated for GT, like Best New Talent, I think it was. Obviously, Jake over in RK is doing phenomenal stuff. I haven't been to all the new restaurants, but I've heard really good things about the restaurant up at Bird in Hand. I think it's called LVN or 11. And then, you know, you've got Aptos opening up in Stirling, Chef Justin. Which is, I mean, I think that's something that no one in the world I don't think anyone in the world is doing what he's planning on doing over there, which is, I mean, it's incredible. Yeah, I can't wait for that one to open. And then obviously, you know, he helped start up Restaurant Botanic, which has been at the, you know, been in the top, you know, restaurants in the country for a number of years now. And then we got young people stepping up. There's a new head chef over there at Chibosho. He's doing cool things. And then, you know, the old guard like Duncan, always a stalwart of the industry. Karina Armstrong, like her restaurant garden is just like starting to take shape. I was speaking to her the other day, and she's super proud of that. And I don't know if you've been to the Salopian Inn, but as you used to walk in and it would be like a little grassy area, which was great to take kids actually and distract them on the grass. But now that whole grass area is now like an extension of her garden. So, yeah, phenomenal stuff. Then you got Little Rickshaw. I think she's been on the podcast before, and a number of other people doing really, really cool stuff. And then you got Matt Stone and Alana Sapple have moved to South Australia, which is, you know, two heavy hitters. So, I mean, they're gonna do wonderful things over here as well. So, yeah, it's jumping, man.
Adelaide is surrounded by the most incredible wine regions and extraordinary produce in South Australia. Do you have any stories of some of the producers that are integral for what you do in the kitchen?
Yeah, absolutely. The one that really stands out, I met them during the I guess you call it like a group excursion for the alumni of the 2018 Young Chef of the Year crew. That was an Appetite for Excellence one, and I was unaware of them at the time. But we went to visit a couple in Largs Bay called Karen and Dennis Holder, and they have a blue swimmer crab fishing company called Two Gulfs Crab. And Dennis is a bit of a tinkerer. Like he's created like his own crabbing nets to make sure that he's only catching the exact crabs that he wants. Because I think he had a few issues with spider crabs getting into his nets. And then he's got solar power on the boats and a number of other things. Like, you know, he electrified his own bike, and, you know, like I said, he likes a bit of a tinker. But the amazing thing about what they were doing was that they were catching, they were picking, and they were selling their own meat, their own crab meat, which is, I mean, I think they sell it all over the country. But and that their crab has been integral to our menu at Nido since day one. We've had I guess it's like a crostini of sorts, focaccia finger, a little bit of crab, a little bit of mayo, coriander, and some pickled cucumbers. Like super, super simple, but let the crab shine because they've done all the hard work. Really, I'm cherry picking their success and their great product, I guess. But so yeah, that's been a phenomenal hit on the menu. People come in, have one, and then order 5 more. And then they have another product, which is their green crab meat, which we use in a crab tagliarini at Fugazzi, which is I actually put that one on the menu because my wife Laura loves crab pasta. So that's just with we do a little fermented chili and like a crab stock. We use the shells to make a crab stock, a crab butter, emulsify it at the end, put a little bit of salmon on top, and yeah, again, that's. I don't think that'll be coming off the menu at Fugazzi anytime soon. That's a bit of a staple there.
You mentioned your wife Laura, and you've also had a kid as well. What's it like having the balance of that family with two venues and everything going on like that for you? It's been a busy couple of years.
It certainly has been. And throw in there Laura going back on everyone's favourite reality TV cooking show. So she actually moved over to Melbourne for the first half of this year with Florence, and we were fortunate enough for the show to provide us with an au pair to help look after Florence. She was breastfeeding at the time, so it was pretty full on. So I mean, she was like what? I'm going to say 8 months old maybe when they moved over to Melbourne. And so I was in Adelaide, working at Fugazzi, trying to pull my weight as much as possible. Then jumping over to Nido, have a meeting with the guys over here, touch base, and then fly over to Melbourne and try and get some family time in over the weekend. Fly back in on Sunday afternoon. So yeah, life, mate. Life was hectic the first half of this year. And then we went over to Europe for 7 weeks, and I think going on that holiday realised that the restaurants are in a phenomenal spot and we have such good people around us, and that I didn't necessarily have to be there all the time, and I could actually step away, but give those guys a bit more responsibility and spend a little bit more time at home with my family. And, my daughter's 18 months old now, so it's really important for me to be around at that time. Do you have kids?
I do. I've got 3. I know what it's like.
And I mean, and you would know like that, the 18-month-old when they're just starting to talk and really get stuff, and every day is something different. So I just wanted to be there for that. And I'm really happy. And the restaurants are doing well, so things are in a good spot.
But was that challenging for you? It's always hard being a new parent and this new love in your life and being so far apart. Was it really challenging, that period for you?
I think I probably underestimated how difficult it would be, and then towards the end of that, we call it six months, give or take. But towards the end of that period, I started to miss them a lot, and I got quite emotional and. And I was glad, although I was happy it happened, I was also glad for it to be over and just have everyone back. And then we went from seeing each other barely on the weekends to then we went overseas to Europe for a little while, and then so we're just Laura and I are just forced back into being with each other every day whilst becoming our own people. So it was quite funny. There was some butting heads. We've got big personalities. But, we've obviously worked it out in the end, and that's marriage, that's life, I guess.
Yeah, I want to have a look at both of your venues and your cooking and what you're doing with both of them in detail in a little bit. But you've worked at some extraordinary restaurants, which I want to dive into. Well, take us back to when you were young, though. Whereabouts did you grow up, and was food really important in your family? Yeah, so
I am an Adelaide boy, born and bred. My parents live in the western suburbs. And my mum is my mum's a first generation Italian Australian, I guess. Her parents moved over after the Second World War. Her father, as the story goes, her father was some sort of prisoner of war and loved it so much in Australia that he decided to move here. I'm not sure how true that is, but it makes for a good story. So mum was born here, and obviously, Italian cultures and Italian heritage has had a massive impact on my life and my cooking. So food has been a part of my life from day one, realistically. And then my dad's side also massively into food. He comes from a family of market gardeners from the Adelaide Hills. So, and my great grandfather was actually a butcher who used to have a butcher shop where the freeway is. Up in Crafers. There's a Sharrad court up in Crafers, just near the pub there, because he was the only bloke that lived on the street. And so, my grandfather himself was a baker, and my grandmother was a phenomenal cook. So we've had cooking across the family, And realistically, Sundays was the day where we'd go to my nonna and papa's house, my dad's parents, in the morning, and we'd have like sausage rolls, scones. Special occasions, my grandmother would make her famous passion fruit sponge. I recall like all the passion fruits going around their rainwater tank. I think that was pretty common back then. And yeah, then just having that on as a icing on, I think it was off the back of like a cornflour, like the recipe for the sponge is off the back of a cornflour packet or something like that. But she's famous for her sponge. Grandpa's sausage rolls, my papa's sausage rolls, they're pretty famous as well. So this is all on Sunday. And then we go over to Nonna's house and we'd have, shit there from the north, from Friuli, Venezia Giulia. So, a lot of polenta, like they use a lot of spices in their braisers up there. So we had, real hard polenta, but like a really aromatic, like rich ragu. That'd be Sunday lunch, and probably have a little food coma after that. But yeah, so food was integral into my life, and some very happy times around food when I was a kid, for sure.
Was the idea of being a chef always one that you had, or like how did you get into the industry?
My brother and I, and to this day, my brother, who's a teacher, we loved watching cooking shows when we were kids. Like, loved watching cooking shows. And so we'd always like watch, like say The Cook and the Chef, like Maggie Beer and Simon, and try and like replicate like dishes here or there, or like, muck around with like slice a tomato, put it in the oven with like just some mozzarella and oregano or something like that. But it always intrigued us. And I think I always liked cooking, and one of our jobs as kids was to cook one night a week. So I always cooked bolognese sauce because that was my favourite. And just like going through that whole process of and doing it the way that you got taught, chopping up the carrot, making the soffritto, sweating it off, like all the technique, the sights, the sounds. I think that's something about that really, like I think the ritual of it, that really. It sort of gelled with me and got me excited. And I mean, we can go into my teenage years at some point if you want, but this was like this is wholesome, like, before puberty sort of thing. Puberty kicked in. And then look, I'll be the first one to say I lost my way a little bit from 14 to probably about 19. We don't need to go too far into that, but I'm sure a number of chefs would have gone on the same journey that I went on, and I think it was my parents' good upbringing that brought me back from some dark places. But and then, funnily enough, I was doing some unruly things, but a couple of the people I was doing these unruly things with worked in a restaurant or in a hotel called the Esplanade Hotel, which is in Brighton by the beach. And I started washing dishes because I needed a bit of a job. I think I got fired. I got fired for being a delinquent from my job as at a sportswear store, and got into the dish bay and really took to it. Like, I love the organisation. I like making things clean. And then the chef was like, "Oh, Max, we need help on the fryer." So I jumped on the fryer and loved that and sort of took to it. And then, before too long, I was cooking the pastas at the pub and started getting interested in it. And then one of the old boys who worked at the pub, his name is Nick, and he brought in, this was around the time when Mark Best just released his first book. Mark, I'm sure you're very familiar with that restaurant and that book. And I started looking at the pictures in this book and I was like, are you fucking serious? This is what food can look like? And then and then I was like, well, I can do that with food. And then I was like, well, how am I going to do this? And I spoke to the chef there. He's like, Max, and his name's Carmen Sabatino, and he's an absolute legend, because he could have quite easily been like, nah, don't worry about that. Like, just stay at the pub. But he said, Max, if you want to take cooking seriously, start an apprenticeship and do it somewhere good. And I took his advice and I went to work at the Lion Hotel. You may or may not have heard it. At the time, it was run by Andrew Spence and Tim Gregg, who are like a hospitality royalty in Adelaide. And the Lion Hotel, I think they'd owned it for like, you know, over 20 years or something like that at the time. And I got an apprenticeship there, and Jay Chalmers was the executive chef at the time, and he was doing fantastic things. They had the express side, which is your typical pub fare, and they had the restaurant side, which was very well regarded at the time, you know, and simple food though. Like it wasn't like ridiculous, but it was really good quality stuff, cooked really nicely, served with you know, accompaniments and condiments that would elevate the produce. And I loved it.
As you started to build your career early on, what were the really important sort of people and venues that helped you sort of move up that ladder?
So one person in particular was Carmen Sabatino at the Brighton Hotel when I was working there, and he said to me, well, as I developed my interest in cooking and picked up that Mark book, I said to him, like, how can I go about doing this? And he could have easily just said, oh, nah, don't worry about that, like stay here and work. But he didn't. He said undertake an apprenticeship. And so I sought an apprenticeship, and I ended up working at you may have heard of it, the Lion Hotel, which was at the time like, and it probably still is, but a bit of an establishment in Adelaide. It was run by Tim Gregg and Andrew Spence, and the executive chef at the time was Jay Chalmers. And actually the general manager was Toby Klein, who's responsible for Adelaide Hills Cider Company, I believe. And I started working there and was surrounded by good people, but I continued watching a lot of cooking shows, and one you may have heard of it. It's called Great British Menu. Where I haven't watched it for a while, but from memory, it's like it's almost like MasterChef for professionals, but they don't have, it's not like mystery boxes and stuff like that, but they come up with their own dishes. And there's a bloke on there doing some very cool stuff called Simon Rogan, and it was very like it was as paddock to plate, terroir driven food as you could possibly imagine. Like, you know, he's basically the mayor of Cartmel. In the northwest of England. He owns the pub, he owns the restaurant, he owns, you know, the accommodation that all the chefs stay in. He owns a farm just outside the town. And I was just like, I got to go here. And so I sent them an email. And I said, I want to come and do some work experience. And the head chef at the time, Mark Birchall, was very kind to me, and he said, yep, no worries, come up. And so that's how I landed that gig at Long Clume. And that was my first real foray into fine dining and that style of cooking. I think around that time that was you know, El Bulli had sort of tapered off, and like that the whole like new Nordic style was just starting to kick in. I had no idea about Noma at this point, but that was phenomenal. Like, and going to the farm, picking the produce, foraging, you know, and like, you know, langoustines coming in all live, and like, Max, here's 200 langoustines, peel these, and like working with that produce, you know, like oysters like that big. Like, Aussie oysters are fantastic, but they're not. We don't let them grow like super big. Like oysters, scallops in the UK, like holy fuck, like it's a different kettle of fish. And so just falling in love with produce and like that style of cooking, and some of the things that they were doing there, like, you know, cooking with liquid nitrogen, and my whole world just like completely changed. And then so I got back to Adelaide, and, you know, I was working in the pub, and I was like, I want to do something else. And at the time, two boys were working with us at the Lion, a bloke named Finton and a bloke named Ryan, and they were working with Jock at McGill Estate prior to working at the Lion. And they said, Max, if you're into this, Jock's opening a new restaurant, why don't you come on board? And so obviously I jumped at the chance to do that. And that's how I ended up working for Jock, and learning about, you know, native produce and native ingredients and foraging and fermenting and really that, you know, I think Jock might have been one of the first outside of Andrew Filkey to bring like that new Nordic style to Australia and use that as a template to and put the native ingredients on top of that and start like really developing, I guess, what we'd call like a new Australian cuisine. Him and Ben Shuri probably the first two doing that, really, weren't they? And then that was, I mean, I still think about, like, you know, when you asked me to come on the show, I was like, oh, I have to talk about this part of my career, like, because I still think about those times working in Arana, and that was like, it was quite funny because I was a second year apprentice at this point, and I'd sort of managed to thrust myself into basically like the cutting edge of what people were doing. You know, Jock was involved in the Gellinaz, like, and Mad Symposium, and he sent me over to Noma to work for 5 weeks. And I do have a funny story about Renee Redzepi in a sec. But you know, that really opened the, I mean, that changed my whole life in more ways than one, because in one hand I was like, wow, this is incredible, like working with all this produce and all this food and like cutting edge fermentation. I actually staged with David Zilber, who's the co-writer of the name of the books escaped me just for one second. I'm currently reading it. Noma's Guide to Fermentation. There we go. And on one hand, so I was in there, but I was conflicted because I was like, you know, waking up at 7 o'clock, going to bed at 1, you know, working for free, and I knew that half of the workforce was stagiaires, which is, you know, looking back, it's like, well, I mean, if you want to work at one of the best restaurants in the world, everyone wants to work there, so you obviously got to start, you know, it's a very, very long trial process. But I was like, fuck. I was like, if I want to do this in Adelaide, I'm not sure how sustainable this would be. And that's when I think I just started switching my mentality a little bit from, wow, this is all amazing and dreamy, to you've got to make, you know, you've got to make very good business decisions along the way as well. Not taking anything away from my time at Noma. Like Renee is like probably the most passionate person I've ever been around in terms of food. I'll tell you the story of when we when we were stages, there was every week you'd have like a group of 7, and we'd go out and forage, and it was around like mulberry season, and they have a particular spot for mulberries, and I'm not sure if they still use it, but you actually have to go. It's about a 3-hour trip because you have to go over the bridge from Copenhagen to Sweden, and then you have to catch a boat, like a ferry from Sweden to Bornholm, it's called, which is it's a Danish under Danish rule, I guess, island. But on this island, there's like all these ancient mulberry trees, like we're talking like 300-year-old mulberry trees, and I fucking love mulberry. And so, you know, we're all there, and like, you know, I'm eating as many mulberries as I'm picking, and I'm probably paying more attention to eating mulberries than I was to actually picking them. And you know, at this point, I've been working in Arana for a while, so I thought I was a bit of a hotshot forager, like and as you do it when you're young, you think your shit doesn't stink, and you know everything, and you know, I'm like telling everyone like, oh yeah, this is this plant and this is that plant, and I've got, you know, my Adelaide Hills Forager's Guide to plants, and like, you know, all this sort of stuff. Anyway, we get back to Noma in the stagiaires room, which is like the production kitchen upstairs, and Renee walks in, and he sees all these mulberries on the table, and most of them are like, you know, raspberry coloured, so they're underripe. And he goes, "Who's picked these?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, me," thinking, you know, oh, I've done a great job here, because I was like, you know, underripe strawberries, underripe mulberries. He's like, "What the fuck are you doing, chef?" I'm like, "What?" He's like, "These trees are 300 years old, and you have picked the mulberries when they're underripe?" And I was like, "Oh no, I'm going home." And I've never looked at a mulberry the same again, mate. I tell you that.
Oh, what was it like coming back to Australia after that experience and thinking about, okay, you got to have a business plan as well? How did that shape that period of time then for you coming back?
It's a great question. Well, as I said, I did think my shit didn't stink a little bit, so I was like, I obviously worked at Arana. I worked at Arana for a further 2 years, and in that time, incredible experiences. Margaret River Gourmet Escape. That was one of the coolest things ever. Got to meet my idol Marco Pierre White, Heston Blumenthal. Got to cook for them. In the chef's kitchen afterwards. Like Fulvio Pier Angelini was in there, and we were like cooking mussel pasta and like all this sort of stuff. And like those 2 years at Arana were like some of the most pivotal years of my life, and I still think about those times fondly. But then I got ahead of myself once again, as I tend to do, and I think a lot of young people do. And I was like, you know what, fuck this, Laura, let's go, because this is where I met Laura. Laura, let's go, let's do a pop up, because we can do this shit by ourselves. And we did it. We did a pop up called Kitchen Selva, and selva in Latin is wild or foraged or salvaged. And so we got all this all these plates, and we foraged all of our stuff, and I was I had a fair bit of knowledge, but not enough to sustainably do a pop up. Anyway, it was good times, but I quickly realised after the money started, after we counted the money after the first or second one, and I was like, I don't think we could do this for very long. And so, then I was like, oh, okay, so I've got to work out how to run a business. And then I was like, okay, well, who runs successful businesses in Adelaide? And that's when I started to seek out Simon Kadachi, because at the time he had Press Food and Wine. He'd just opened like Bread and Bone and Odgie. And maybe May, and it's like that small bar license in Adelaide had just started like kicking off, and so there was all these like really cool little spots opening up, and I was like, well, he must know how to run a business, and he does. And so I mean that's really when I started working for Simon is after the Selva thing sort of fell on its ass, and that's when I started delving into like, well, how do you run a business?
You were looking after that side of things and learning there, but restraint as a chef and realizing that balance between creativity and what the guest wants. When did you sort of land and get really confident in that sense, like within your own food?
Well, here's another classic story of me getting ahead of myself. So Simon loves going to Singapore, and there's a bloke who runs, I think it's called Cloud Street. I think his name's Rishi, and he was doing a collab at Shibosho, which is where this is where I originally went to work for Simon, was at Shibosho with Adam. And I worked there for the best part of 18 months as a head chef. Anyway, then we took over the pot, and like here I was, like, this is my chance to like do something and put everything that I've learned on a plate and like this sort of thing. And so I remember Rishi from Cloud Street coming over and doing a collab at Shibosho, and Simon brought him in with the restaurant manager, Adam, and everyone was there on the table, and I was like pulling out all the stops, like got this like abalone from Airwolf, which is like on the Eyre Peninsula, and like made that, and then we had this bread, and I made like this leftover sauce and like all this sort of stuff, and I thought I was doing like something really, really cool. And then Simon called me up the next morning and goes, Max, we need to have a chat. And I was like, oh, here we go. How good was it? It must have been pretty good. And he goes, Max, you can't keep cooking like this in this area. This is in Hyde Park. This is a very conservative area of Adelaide. He goes, Max, you got to change your cooking. Why don't we open a pasta bar? And I thought about it for a minute, and I was like, This is exactly what I need to learn, and so that's what we did. And we turned the pot into the Nido, and I learned how to food cost. I learned how to, run a kitchen with tight cogs and manage staff and all of the rest of it. And I guess it's not history, because there's still a lot to learn, but that's how we got to where we are today, I guess.
If you look back at sort of the younger self of you, like trying to carve a career and now sort of have a formed career and respected one, how different are you as a person to that young kid back then that was learning his craft?
It's actually really funny, and I think everything's connected, and because I was concentrating so hard on the business aspect of things, I sort of forgot where I'd come from a little bit. And so now having my daughter around and having a bit more time at home and sort of like allowing my brain to just it's kind of like decompressing now over what my career feels like. It's, I think I've been cooking for 14 years now. My brain is just starting to decompress a little bit, and all the new Nordic stuff, is starting to come back into my life, and the fermentation, and I'm starting to look at little plants on the side of the street again. I'm like, oh, hello, so it's in there, and I think I've got those tools there now. So I think eventually something will come of it. I don't have any plans, but I think there's something bubbling away under the surface there for sure.
Well, both of your venues are very popular, and a lot of people love the cooking that you're doing. Is there a dish or two from each venue that really exemplifies sort of where your food is at the moment that you can tell us about?
Absolutely. At Fugazzi, I would say the mortadella sandwich is probably the one that sticks out for me. That's the one that I would say for this. It's not necessarily, obviously they're great producers. We use mortadella from Marino. We use salumi, like a Venetian salumi from Secco, and we crisp it up, and we actually, the secret to that one is that's actually the thing that we do the least to. We make pickled shallots and we put it on there, but we crisp up the salami, and it's between some nice fluffy white bread, but and it's got a fantastic margin and people love it. It's one of those ones that ticks all the boxes. And then I would be remiss if I didn't add the whipped ricotta and gnocco fritto to this mix here, which originated at Nido, and it's probably the dish that we're best known for. I think it's one best snack in the advertiser at some point, and that's another funny story, because I was trying to be really chefy and do a goat's curd and bataga thing with fried bread, and Laura's like, Max, just fucking whip some ricotta and put some honey on it. And I was like, oh yeah, that's actually a really good idea. So I can't take the full credit for that. That's a true Laura and Max dish, that one. But I would say those two. Again, very good cost of goods, very simple. Excellent ingredients, excellent honey, excellent ricotta, beautiful fried bread that we make, and then the other side at Fugazzi is it's just a snack that everyone wants to eat, and it doesn't have to be overcomplicated either. It can just be a sandwich, but it's done interestingly, and it just ticks all the boxes, So they're probably good examples of where things are at the moment.
You mentioned that you and Laura both have really big personalities. What do you like in the kitchen cooking together? Is there a good balance there?
No. I think because we've both grown up around food, and food's such a big part of our lives, both at work and outside of work. It's hard. It's probably hard for us to separate the business and home dynamic. And so, it's probably, it probably was, it was probably a little bit awkward for a few people around us. But, we do squabble. We squabble here and there, as, I think most couples do. It'd be very interesting. It'd be interesting to talk to someone who doesn't squabble. But, yeah, I think it just got to the point where we're just like, you know what, Loz was like, I want to do my media stuff, and I was like, well, you do that, and I'll hang around at the restaurants, and that'll work out really well. So, and it has really worked out well, a lot better than I think if we both stayed in the same venues.
Well, you're doing amazing things there, and I can't believe it's been taken so long to get you on the show. But what do you love about what you do?
I think I ask myself this question a lot, and I just love everything about cooking. I love, and not just cooking. I think the whole package of hospitality in general. And I think it does probably get lost on us a little bit in the kitchen, but and the front of house gets front of house obviously customer facing a lot more, but our purpose is to people come in to not think about their troubles, or to come in to have a conversation, or to come in to celebrate a special occasion, and I do think that kind of gets lost a little bit, but. If we can be the people that facilitate that environment and give them a fantastic experience, whether it's with a little a sandwich that is just a little clever little bite, or it's something more elaborate. Like, everything's got its place, and if we can provide people with a enjoyable experience, whether it's just a casual dinner on a Tuesday, or a special occasion for a 30th or an anniversary or whatever, then that's really important to me, and I really get a kick out of that, is making someone's night, or over delivering on something.
Well, Max, what an honour to get you on the show. Absolutely entertaining. We'll have to get you back on soon, so please keep in touch and we'll catch up again soon.
We should do one with you, me, and Laura. She mentioned, when I said to her that I was coming on the show, she said, "Don't make sure you tell Anthony that I'm still keen to come on the show." So,
okay, great.
Yeah, that would be very entertaining, having both of us on.
Yeah, we'll have to get her on, mate, and keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Stay safe and be well.